Hello.
Okay, hello, good morning, everyone. Um, um, please let me check if every presenter has been here. For the first presenter, Max. Okay, hello, good morning, everyone. Um, please let me check if every presenter. Yeah, so for the first speaker is Max Royekers. I'm sorry if I'm mispronounce the name. Is Max here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. The second presenter is Hannah Rory. Is Hannah here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Then the third one is Sayan Lot. Is Sayan here?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Okay. And then the last one is Giri Nelwan. Giri is here?
Hello.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, so I think we can start our panel session now as the presenters, all presenters have been here. So we can start from the first presenters, Max. So the title of our panel now is Democracy for the Margins. So we will have four interesting papers with very exciting topics to be discussed. And of course, then in the discussion, we could talk more about the topic. How could we exchange opinion, perspectives from each of our research? So yeah, I think all the presenters are talk about the to what extent the democracy has been accessible for the margins for the vulnerable communities. And then yes, I think from the different experiences of those communities being discussed in the papers, I think we can have a resourceful discussion in the discussion session there. Okay, so for the first presenters, Max, are you ready to start the presentation now?
Yes, please allow me to share screen.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your time. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Max Rijkers, and I will be presenting my paper called Undesired Voices, the Position and Struggles of the Warga Negara Tidak Asli during the first Indonesian national vote. The background of my study are the Indo-Europeans, those of Asian and European ancestors. And in this case, the Indonesian ones, those who took on Indonesian citizenship after the revolution and those who stayed in Indonesia, and they had a special minority status along with the Arabs and the Chinese, which granted them guaranteed representation in parliament or the DPR. And background during this time is the early 50s, where they faced a lot of discrimination, suspicion, and were often political scapegoats for various incidents like RMS, Westerling, and Darul Islam, because yeah, the Indo-Europeans, they were often associated with the Dutch, and they were viewed very negatively, of course, during this time period. But the same period also saw the consolidation of two main organizations, a social one, the Gabungan Indo untuk Kesatuan Indonesia or the GIKI, and a main political party, the Persatuan Indo Nasional, the PIN. And they mostly focus on questions of assimilation and equal rights. And the method used is the historical method according to Kunto Wijoyo with a qualitative descriptive method, which consists of first the team selection, which resulted in the title of my paper, then the collection of sources. I've mainly used government sources, contemporary essays, and both Indonesian and Dutch language newspapers, which I then validated by comparing those to each other. Afterwards is the interpretation of the resulting data, and then lastly the historiography or the writing of the paper itself. And that's how went the preparations and campaigning for the national elections by the Indo-Europeans. Well, as a minority group, they had a right on a certain number of seats which were guaranteed in parliament, and the to be established constituent assembly or the constituante. And these were actually granted in the constitution yeah, as a temporary measure. If those seats would not be reach those number of seats during the elections, then those would be added afterwards. But at the same time, many Indo-Europeans felt the burden of some semi and unofficial discrimination in social, economic, and housing sectors. Thus, the only political body with mostly Indo-European members was the PIN, which was the only one that participated in the elections, and it was headed by E.P. Snel, who was an Indo-European nationalist from the early revolution. Initially, they did not want to participate in the elections because there were already a lot of other parties with similar nationalist thought. But because of, once again, increasing discrimination against the Indo-Europeans themselves, they changed their stance to further promote legal and social integration and also assimilation. But these preparations did not go very smooth because old feuds between the GIKI, the social organization, and the PIN were once again ignited, mainly between their two main members, Jeppe Snel and Major Polak. Reasons for this were old feuds between the two, but also different opinions on assimilation issues. And Major Polak also thought that any Indo-European political movements would do more harm than good to the community as a whole. But while the GIKI did not participate, they did advise their members to participate actively for other nationalist parties. So what were the hopes and wishes of the Indo-Europeans for the elections? Well, first of all was social acceptance in social, economic, and housing sectors because they faced a lot of discrimination in these sectors and they did not want to be affiliated to the Dutch no more, especially because of all the bad things that were happening. And they also thought education was very important for the assimilation of their youth as future builders of the Indonesian nation, and also they wanted equal rights on land ownership and economic subsidies and others, but because of their minority status, they could not have equal rights with the other Indonesians. So they actually wanted those minority rights to be removed. But they also focused on the future of Indonesia and wanted to be more involved in domestic security issues, in the economy, in education, and they wished, like all other Indonesians, an end to the instability that had plagued Indonesia for quite some time. Thus, what was their involvement in the elections? And what were the results? Well, expectations were very low before the elections had even started. Like I said before, there was a certain quota of seats, and if those would not be reached, then extra seats would be added. Um, Unfortunately, the political parties during the time they took advantage of this, and they placed their Indo-European members very low on their list because then they would not be chosen and they could be added to parliament afterwards with the extra seats. Thus, nobody really expected for any Indo-Europeans to be elected at all. And the same period also saw various negative developments which impacted the integration of the Indo-Europeans themselves, which uh, yeah, did not go very good for them, which saw them facing more discrimination. Thus, the early results, no of the 25 participating Indo-Europeans were chosen, but according to the constitution, these seats had to be divided according to the wishes of the minority themselves. The PIN they received around 5,620 votes in total, and the EP Snell himself a couple of thousand. But since they participated as a national party, not a minority one, the new coalition reasoned, well, there was no way to verify how many minority voters voted for them, so we are going to uh, appoint our own minority members instead. So even though it was fairly obvious that as a party with mostly Indo-European members, most of these voters were Indo-Europeans actually. Thus, yeah, a sort of seat grabbing contest began between all the different parties, especially those who were part of the new coalition. But the Indo-Europeans tried to have some voice in this process as well, and they compiled various lists with their own recommendations to fill these empty seats. The first one was made by Mayor Polek from the Giki Jakarta branch, and his list had mainly his own Giki Jakarta branch members, but especially those with party affiliation, because he thought, well, if they already have party affiliation, the chance for them to be elected will be even greater. But he refused any contact with other groups. Then the other main uh, list was offered by the Badan Kontak Perwakilan Golongan Kecil Eropa, which was a neutral body that proposed an alphabetical list with well-known figures according to the different community orientations. And this one was supported by the PIN and eventually also the two other lists, which were mainly made because of protests with Mayor Polek. And thus, what happened after the national elections? How did how were these seats eventually filled? Well, there was unfortunately no regulation on how these seats had to be appointed, besides according to the wishes. But the new coalition, they started to reason, well, yeah, whoever we will appoint, well, they will obviously be according to the wishes from our perspective. So the Indo-Europeans did not really have a voice in this process. And in the meantime, also pressure increased to actually dissolve these minority seats, but that would require a new constitution, which was to be drafted by the to be established Constituent Assembly after the elections. Thus, in Parliament, it would take 6 months until the first minority seats were appointed because of the political games between all the parties. And no Indo-European voices were heard in this process, especially the criticism about the lack of democracy in everything. And eventually, both the Giki and PIN were disappointed with the results because 50% of the appointed members were Muslims, while only 5% of the Indo-European community itself were Muslim. So they said, yeah, this is not representing our community, and they were also only chosen based on party affiliation, as you can also see in the PowerPoint, not because they were well-known figures in the community itself. And the last member, Prinsen, he was not even an Indo-European, but actually a Dutch person. So, yeah, there were a lot of complaints about the members that were eventually appointed. For the Constituent Assembly, which was tasked to draft a new constitution, the same thing happened actually, but it would take even another year before the first minority members were appointed. Um, Interestingly, um, most who were chosen for parliament and the Constituent Assembly were actually chosen from Mayor Polek's list, um, which had, of course, to do with their party affiliation. And there were also two women who were appointed to the Constituent Assembly. So it shows some representation, but as also J.P. Snell himself stated, it was very ironic how the really important members and figureheads of the community, they were not appointed at all. So they had some successes, but the real important members they tried to get into uh, parliament, that did not happen because the seat grabbing contest left no crumbles behind for even someone like Mayor Polak. Thus, they tried to reorientate themselves after the elections, and they soon supported Sukarno's plans for a gotong royong cabinet and for guided democracy, because Sukarno was also not very pleased with the new coalition. And the Kikienpin even sent a joint delegation to express their support, as you can also see uh, in the photo on the right side. This is what President Sukarno said to them, that he was also their father. So yeah, their focus really remained on assimilation and building towards the Indonesian state. But there was also quite some Indo-Europeans who, in the end, left Indonesia altogether because of the increasing discrimination once again, and because the elections did not really give them any hope for a better place for them inside the Indonesian society. And there was also no political orientation left anymore after the elections because, uh, yeah, no Indo-European managed to get inside the parliament or the Constituent Assembly. Thus, in conclusion, well, the elections were awaited optimistically, like every Indonesian, but also like every other Indonesian, it resulted in a lot of disappointment. And but there were hopes for acceptance, education, stability, equality, and a future Indonesian state. There also was a universal agreement that minority voices were not desired, though, and no special minority party participated in the elections. Only the PIN participated, but as a nationalist party. They still, of course, wanted their voices to be heard, but as Indonesian ones, not as minority ones. Unfortunately, that did not happen because party politics and intrigues prevented any democratic and meaningful Indo-European representation. Only the Giki booked some successes with their list, but yeah, like I said before, Mayor Polak himself even was not elected into parliament in the end. Thus disappointed, most kept hopeful and supported Sukarno's plans for a guided democracy, while others left Indonesia altogether. Uh, Thank you for your time, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Max. It's very interesting presentation. Thank you so much for your kind of um, historical investigation on the experience of some part of the Indonesian citizens, if we could say actually, but based on the so-called non-Indonesian identity, then the exclusion happened at the time. That is very interesting to be discussed further in the discussion session, I think. Thank you so much, Max. I think we can continue to the next presenter. Um,
Yes.
okay, is it Hannah? Yes. Okay, so
Yeah.
please, Hannah, you can start your presentation. You
Right.
would have like 20 minutes for your presentation, please.
Yes. One moment. Try to put, yes. Okay.
And yeah, just as a reminder, please feel free for all the presenters and the participants to use whether English or Indonesia in your presentation or in your questions. You can ask your question directly, or you can start to put your question on the chat box from now, I think. Please, Anna.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to present my research about religious expression and religious stage, and the sample is for identity of International ASEAN Kids movement in West Papua. So here, the background of the research that in 2021, when I work in West Papua, and so there is conflict that occur. Some youth of the mainstream church mentioned that there's one organization that is astray or heresy because they teach to pray for Israel directly, to pray for Israeli. Although they don't know deeply or exactly why this news spread around cities and village pretty massive. On some occasion, could join the service of this organization. Its name is ISKIM. Acronym, it's mean International ASEAN Kids Movement. So these ISKIM adherents, the way they worship is not so different with traditional mainstream church. They just more directly suggest and verses the Bible more to Israel and to express their historical grievance in spiritual way of belief. Those eventually discrimination towards ISKIM already spread into a stigma, which is threatening the mainstream church and majority religion as well. And yeah, because of the adherents sometimes using Israel flag to mention their belief expression for and yeah, so it's kind of like threatening us also for the government. It's like a smoke, suffocating spokes that the government which want to calm and stability for majority. So the government legitimize the discriminatory attitude with pressure for the mainstream religion, and in this case, it's a Christian religions. In my research, through social identity theory that I use for the method, it's shown bigger distinction, the way of Papuan thinking of the rest Indonesian from Java, Sulawesi, Sumatra, and Kalimantan think that Papuan people nationality is like the problem of their sense of crisis identity that's very strong, based from the experience that I had, and that crisis, whether they want to be stay of the part of Indonesians, or they want to strongly encourage the self-determined to be nationality, to be their own independence. So brief history of Papua, it's rooted from the time of Sultanate of Tidore, which colonized in 1453. So the fragile identity from that time that couldn't develop their fields of identity nationalisms of Papuan people, and so rather than living to be as one nationalism, they more likely tribal or ethnicity. Encourage that. And at 1898, the West Papuan colonized by the Netherlands, which came to Indonesia. And then since 1945, when Indonesian declared independence, and based from several books and articles, that West Papuan people did not join the country, did not join Indonesian by the time, So the Dutch government prepared for the West Papuan for its own independence throughout 1950s. And at 1 December at 1961, West Papuan declared their own independence and raised their own flag, the Morning Star flag. Although there's still controversial about that. So, and then the conflict broke out between Netherlands and Indonesian government. So after West Papuan declared their independence, in the same month, by that time, Sukarno launched Operation Trikora, Operasi Trikora, because of the Tans feel afraid that Indonesian, it's from UN, that Indonesia will become a communist country because of Russia assistance to Trikora operation. That moment, and after negotiation between Indonesia and Netherlands that facilitated by the UN in New York, it was decided that the West Papua would be handed over to Indonesia until election or plebiscite of the people of West Papua be arranged. And that voting is called Act of Free Choice. Act of Free Choice. And several research, like journalists at Campstech and Richard Schaffel, the act or the voting was a sham of a fake, because Indonesian military handpicked 1,026 representatives of Papuan people. They bribed them to choose to remain a part of Indonesia. So at 1963, UN, UNTIA, International United Nations Temporary Decree that West Papua became part of Indonesian territory, West Papua. So although after more than 60 years, integrate with Indonesia, problem of economic, health, education, and mostly problem of the racisms that occurred 2019. It's quite a massive and international polemic. And despite also of the human right that human right violation that the data show, killing of 1,000 people, and that they call it the black book and so forth. Even so, after more than 20 years from 2001 implementation, special autonomy or autonomy khusus, otsus, couldn't solve the problem of West Papua. And the problem of special autonomy is like, I call it here a boomerang. It causes structure and permanent poverty since the new order under Suharto era until special autonomy period, because the special autonomy fund or the money only satisfied the leader of tribe based on which according to Mutakin research, it is the central government motivation, the way to distort the economy and relation between tribes, in a tribe and local ordinary people. That way injustice occurs from an equal distribution of these funds. And the church in West Papua, the Christianity. So Christian missionary has come to West Papua based on that has been through the churches and through missionary education, the developments being part of the history. And the research of Marcus Campbell about religion and resistance in West Papua, the role of Christian in the struggle for peace with justice. He said that faith has been a central feature of West Papua resistance to Indonesia colonialism. Although the power of most churches through also could possibly discriminate or became destructive to minority rights. So there is a positive and negative way of perspective to see the power of church in West Papua. So simply to put, the formation of national and political identity of Papuan people is through dual colonialisms from Netherlands and Indonesia, that some people still feel that they are being colonized from the central government of Indonesia. So many Papuans share a historical grievance about the manner their homeland was integrated into Indonesian. Problem in also other problem in participation and political bureaucratic competition, territories economics, and migration population from other land like from Java that cause expression of conviction, the assertion that Papuan face extinction in their own land. So that problem and survey in 2022, the general data of West Papua from their population is 5,601 and 888 people population, with 66% is a Protestant, 90% Islam, and almost 14% Catholic, and less than 1% other religion. So the vulnerability of Papuan people's identity to survive with their faith, although discrimination emerged toward ISKIM, the minority International Asian Kids Movement. And in here, research I propose the social identity theory by Henry Teifel. The method that I used to explore this study in this so the primary progenitor is Henry Teifel. So Teifel defines social identity will be understood as part of individuals' self-concept, which derive from their knowledge of their membership of a social group together with the value and emotional significance attached to that membership. Behind social identity, there is categorization and identification and comparison. So categorization is cognitively to see from the appearance, like race and ethnicity that easily to appearance. Individuals may identify with many different social groupings and deploy these as required to maintain their personal value and emotional significance. And for identification, it's whether certain social categories hold specific ideas or concept as normative and engage in certain social behavior. Comparison is discerning characteristic and behavior who's to know who's in and who's out of the group, along with their own self-categorization and salient or meaning of the social category. So this theory has been applied into biblical studies. And so one research done in interpretation of the Bible, they use 1 Corinthians from Rosner and Rosner Porter interpretation using the same method on 1 Corinthians and social identity approach. So they demonstrate from the epistle, especially Paul Corinthians and social identity, and Paul Corinthians to constructing the identity of the tribe. By the time it's a Jewish tribe, and for the foreign, like Rome and Greece, but also being a Christian in Christ as well. Emerging the Pauline mission, using with a cross-crushing identity from Paul's ethnic infidelity shift to rhetorical statement in their research that the statement from Paul that he said, I have become all things to all people, became fluid identity. So I found great beneficial applying this approach to overcome the problem of the Papuan identity crisis. This is that in this study I try to imply in the ISKIM International Kids issue case. Yeah. And so things that could be reflective from the research that I'm still process on it. So through understanding social identity from the Bible, knowing that identity is not only from designation of a group, like majority Christian, majority Muslim, stay in West Papua. Therefore, social identity is highly dynamic, so it could easily possibly change. And I hope it could be enrich understanding for local people. It's also possible for majority people to reducing attitudes of ethnocentrisms that could possibly emerge, or they to be excluded for their tribes, and try to avoid that. Instead of it, accepting cultural diversity acceptance, so that religious expression such as ISKIM can be established without discrimination in more appropriate way. They could feel more freely express the religion belief, because it's already human right, basically. To enrich the perspective of religion pluralisms based on the data, diversity have a high degree of religious commitment that most likely occur. And because when the most religion take control, the less democracy happen, especially for minorities people. Yep, I think that's it from my research. Thank you for your listening. I hope for further comment or insight for further discussion. Back to moderator.
Okay, thank you so much, Hannah. It is again a very interesting topic for us. I believe that from based on this research, it could like contribute something to our discussion in the next session. We can compare it with the previous papers to gain to reflect on the situation of democracy in Indonesia. And what is interesting with this presentation is there is the dynamics of the Papua itself that is very complicated, but there is also the it is also related to the charts there. And yeah, I think we can discuss it further in the discussion session. Thank you so much, Sana. We can continue to the next presenter. It is Sayan Lot from Presidency University. Please, Sayan.
Hello, yes.
Yeah.
I'm starting then, sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So firstly, I would like to thank ICIR for inviting me to present at this conference. My paper doesn't deal that much with about democracy or any indigenous religion, but it does deal with the indigenous people of Northeast India. So my paper explores the Bene Menashe Jewish community of Manipur, which is a small community of about with maximum 5,000 individuals, which has been caught up in the present Metis Kuki ethnic violence. So first, let's discuss about Northeast India, which is comprised of 7 states or 8 states, depending on who you ask, and it is as much diverse as the rest of India, with nearly all religions of India find their mention in Northeast. Even the small religious community like Judaism is the most recent religion which has emerged in the Northeast since the 1970s. And it comprises of 12% of India's indigenous population, who are known as scheduled tribes in India, as they were included in schedules in the British era Government of India Act 1935 that marked them for special treatment that was later continued by the Indian Constitution. It houses more than 200 tribes who speak about 220 languages. Most of these languages belong to the Austroasiatic and Tibeto-Burman families, with only a few belonging to the Indo-Aryan group. This region was politically incorporated in India pretty recently in the colonial era by the British government, because previously there were only commercial and cultural exchanges which dated back as far as to 322 BC, the Mauryan Empire, one of the earliest empires of ancient India. And even parts of Assam, which you can see, they were incorporated into, they were tributaries of the Gupta Empire in ancient India and the Mughal Empire in medieval times. Huensang, the famous Chinese traveler who visited India to collect Buddhist manuscripts, visited the Kamrup kingdom, which was the ancient name for the state of Assam, which ruled parts of Assam in mid-7th century. Detached from the Indian mainstream, these tribal societies developed their own system, which was led by a headman, and the barter system was prevalent. The British intervention introduced the money-oriented market economy, Western education mainly in urban centers, while the traditional system continued in rural regions, even in post-colonial India. In the states of Manipur and Mizoram, the missionaries only entered in the 1890s, whereby they standardized the tribal languages, whereby the dominant dialect were adopted as the print language in Latin script. This was also true for other Indian languages such as Bengali and Assamese Hindi, where the dominant dialect was adopted as the print language and replaced all other dialects. Besides the Bible, the history and beliefs of the ancient Israelite tribes were also introduced among the tribals of the Northeast India. The Christianization, which began in 1890s, it's increased in speed since 1912, as during the Mizoram famine there, the Christian Mizos freely shared their food with all, while the indigenous tribals didn't share that much. At that time, the missionaries were adopted the cunning tactics of passing off modern medical cures that they offered to the tribal patients as Jesus's miracles. And Western education through the missionary institutions was another fact which attracted the indigenous people towards Christianity. Since 1950s, a few among the Chin, Kuki, and Mizo tribes who adopted Christianity gradually started to drift towards Judaism. They observed Jewish Sabbath, they observed the Kashrut, which is the Jewish food law, and there was a few similarities between the pre-Christian indigenous beliefs and Judaism. They named themselves Bene Menashe since the 1980s, which means the children of Menashe, based on their ancestral shadowy figure of Manasseh or Manmasi, which they claimed was the descendant of the biblical character of Manasseh. The community is at present about 10,000 strong, equally split between India and Israel. They have been the only Judaizing movement in India who have been able to emigrate to Israel in successive numbers, and a few of them have even been inducted into the Israeli Defense Forces. Mainly the right wing support them in Israel and the left wing opposes them. They have been settled along disputed territories such as West Bank. Let's first discuss about the emergence of the movement in Manipur and Mizoram. Their pre-Christian religion was based on an omnipresent gods known by different names to different tribes, such as the Parthian to the Mizos and Khwazing to the Chingu. And there was a shadowy ancestral figure that is, as previously mentioned, about Manmasi or Manasya. And there were also evil spirits equivalent to the biblical Saturn, such as Kuachia and Ramuhai. And they practiced animal sacrifices, mainly fowl and pig, to placate these spirits. There were 3 agricultural festivals. One was Mimkut, held in August, September. Another was Chapcharkut, that was held in March. And the third one was Polkut, held in December. since the 1930s, they actually grew dissatisfied with the Christian missionaries and tried to readapt their traditional religion in a modern framework. Saichunga, a Mizo revivalist leader, was the first leader who claimed that the Mizos were a lost tribe of ancient Israel. Later, scholars Hillel Halkin and Isaac Thamjom, who is himself a Bnei Menashe Jew, identified three similarities between the Bnei Menashe religion and Judaism. First was the figure of Manmasi or Manasseh. The second was a traditional song that has been passed down in the community since generation, that is the Song of the Red Sea. It narrates the story of the Israelites who fled Egypt during the time of Moses. And then the pre-Christian holiday of Chol Niko, sorry for my pronunciation. It literally means the day of abstention from meat held in spring. It is similar to a Jewish festival held during that time. In 1950s, Melachala or Chalianthanga, he had a vision that cookies and Mizos were descendant of ancient Israeli tribes. Since then, they gradually started to adopt Jewish customs, such as the Sabbath on Saturday, no consumption of pork, and observe 3 Jewish festivals which they are from in the Bible, such as Passover, Pentecost, and Sukkot. Regard Jesus as the Messiah, while at the same time observing Jewish customs. The Christians derogatorily referred them as Israel Poles. They discriminated against the Jews and even expelled them from villages. This was similar to the treatment that was given to the Christians by the traditional tribal leaders when Christianity entered the region in late 19th century. At that time, the Jews wrote a letter to the Knesset and got reply, which the letter reply was lost during the 1966. The period of 1966 was pretty turbulent in the history of Mizoram during the Mizo uprising, as the Indian army was sent to quell the uprising, and one general from the Indian army, J.F.R. Jacob, who played a major role in the independence of Bangladesh at that time, later, when he went to visit the Mizo villages, the villagers, very few came. Although he was a Jew from Calcutta, and the Mizo Jewish villagers later regretted not coming to meet him. In 1969, Pasto Thangruma spread these ideas from Mizoram to Manipur and Myanmar among the Chinkuki Mizo groups. There was a split in the community in the mid-1970s, whereby the breakaway faction led by Thangkolun Lungdim rejected Jesus as Messiah, and they established contacts with the Bombay and Calcutta Jewish communities and started to send their students to their schools and colleges. In 1979, the Rabbi Eliyahu Avikel of Amishaba group aimed at bringing the lost Jewish tribes to Israel, officially named the group Bnei Menashe based on their ancestral figure, and aided in their aliyah or emigration to Israel since 1989. There have been 2 DNA tests of the community. The first one held in Kolkata in 2004 found traces of genetic linkages between them and the Middle Eastern people, although it was rejected by the Israeli scientists, but the Israeli rabbinate recognized this result and officially declared Bnei Menashe as a lost tribe of Israel, opening the vista for them to emigrate to Israel. They become the second group after the Beta Israel of Ethiopia to be recognized as such. The 2007 test conducted in the Haifa Technion in Israel, it gave pretty difficult result. Only 2 of Middle Eastern ancestry was found among 488 Bnei Menashe individuals. That is the J2, which is commonly found across Jews all over the world. Mayas Samra gave an interesting anecdote about the Nepalese Hindu Gurkha person who converted to Judaism and was accepted into the community. A few members of the community were against him, and he was even heckled by Christian Mizo youths during a Jewish festival. It is interesting to note that the other Bnei Menashe Jews who were previously Christians were left alone, while only this person was heckled. Shalva Weil has worked on this dual conversion of the Chinkuki Mizo group, firstly into Christianity in colonial era, and then into Judaism in post-colonial times. She views these as both ancient and modern. Ancient in the sense that it reconnects, the Judaism tries to reconnect the tribals with their traditions, and modern as it helps them carve out a separate identity from their Christian neighbors. Yulia Egorov has given 3 socio-historical factors responsible behind the emergence of this Bnei Menashe Judaism movement. Firstly, British colonialism, which introduced them to the Christianity through the missionaries. Secondly, the nationalist aspirations of them down the Indian-Burma border, which gave them the try to maintain a separate identity from their Christian neighbors. And thirdly, the politics of the state of Israel, which whereby the support and opposition to them has been divided along the left-right lines. Let's discuss about the geography of Manipur. Here is a map of Manipur on the right. As you can see, the centrally located green portion is the Imphal Valley, which is the most fertile part and comprises only 10% of the region. It houses the majority Hindu Meiteis, and the remaining part is the hill districts, where the northern part houses the majority Christian Naga tribe and the southern part houses the majority Christian Kuki tribes. Although comprising 90% of the area of the state, only 10% of the hill districts are inhabitable. While anyone can buy land in the Imphal Valley, in order to buy land in the hill districts, a special permission is required, which is rarely granted. Although it is not, we can note that they are Hindus and Christians, but both all communities have some minorities within them over here, such as the presence of Muslim and Christian Metis, and Christian and Buddhist Nagas and animist Nagas, and over here Bene Menashe Jews among the Kukis. Like other Indian Jews and Muslims, the Bene Menashe also maintained very close relations with the Pangal or the Meitei Muslims. Pangal is the corruption of the word Bengal. In the present conflict, which originated in the Manipur after the Manipur High Court decided to grant ST status to the Meiteis, and the Manipur government decided to implement the colonial era Indian Forestry Act of 1927. Through the first, the Meiteis could easily buy purchase lands in the hills, and they could benefit from the positive discrimination in education jobs, which is granted to the STs. And secondly, through the second act, the state can declare large tracts of forest as state preserves, which violated the right of indigenous communities to hunt, graze, cultivate, or use the forest. Although the current conflict is not the first, there has been a long history of inter-tribal and intertribal violence. I will discuss only the ones which occurred in the post-colonial India. In the 1950s, there was a intertribal violence between two subtribes of the Kukis regarding the naming of Kuki language. One was Hamar and the other was Thado. And in the 1990s, there was a violence between the Nagas and Kukis, whereby the Bene Menashe was targeted due to their ethnic identity, and Naga even gave the ultimatum to Kukis to leave Manipur, and there was even the inter-community mixed couples were targeted. Somrat Chaudhuri gave a pretty prophetic message which came true this May, that Manipur remains suspended in an uneasy peace, prone to descending into fraternal conflict, just as it was 1,000 years ago, in the days when clan warred against clan and tribe against tribe. To protest against the decisions by the government and the High Court, the Kukinaga youth organized a tribal solidarity march in Churachandpur on May 3. Churachandpur is the second largest city of Manipur, and the city dominated mainly by the indigenous tribes. It is located in the hill district. During that time, some miscreants set fire to the Cook memorial commemorating the Kuki uprising against the British, which is located in Imphal, that is located in the Imphal Valley, in the Meitei-dominated area. Since then, the intercommunity violence started between the Meiteis and Kukis, whereby both targeted each other, and there was an unofficial population exchange. The internet was shut down to stop the spread of misinformation. There was spread of misinformation regarding the kidnapping of Meitei youths by Kuki men and regarding the rape of Meitei women by Kukis. This led to cases of revenge violence. Hence, it has been stopped. Shojol, which was a Kuki village located in the hill district, it was burned on the night of May 3 by Meitei militants. The villagers could only helplessly watch their house burn from a nearby hillock where they took shelter. W.L. Hangxin. He is the member of the Bene Menashe Council and the head of the only Kuki majority party in the Manipur legislature. He mentioned that basically it is and has always been a conflict over land, and he calls it a process of Meitei Levenstrom, whereby the Meiteis are trying to grab the Kuki lands akin to Hitler doing what he did during the World War II in Eastern Europe. Being a minority within the minority, the Bene Menashe Jews have been caught up in this violence. They escaped to 3 safe zones, leaving back their everything, their houses and all. First is the Kangpokpi, which is a Kuki majority town in North Manipur. Second is Churachandpur, and the third is Aizawl in neighboring Mizoram. The casualties have been 200 among the Kuki, with thousands displaced and many villages razed. Among 200, only 2 belong to the Bene Menashe, as this is a small community. 200 churches and the synagogue have also been burnt to ground. The synagogue was located in Shojol village. NGOs have come to forward to help them besides the governments. There have been the Jewish NGO Degel Menashe and Christian NGO Operation Ebenezer Operation Exodus, which is working together to aid the displaced people. Pramod Singh, who is the leader of Meitei Lipun, that he calls a socio-cultural organization aimed at bringing all the Meitei individuals located in South and Southeast Asia together under an umbrella. He tried to delegitimize the citizenship of the Kukis by referring to them as illegal immigrants, outsider, tenants, not part of the family, not indigenous to Manipur. In an interview with Karan Thapar, which is available on YouTube for anyone to see, and he even gave the slogan, genocidal slogan, "Let's annihilate our traditional rival on the hills," just 5 days before the violence began. This is similar to the slogans given before the Rwandan genocide began. Amidst these turbulent times, there have been a couple of joyful events, such as the marriage of Ashat Chen, who is an Israeli citizen, and Naomi Lau JM, who is a Bnei Menashe, on May 15 at Aizawl. It is the first instance of an Israeli citizen and the Bnei Menashe Indian citizen marrying in India. The second was the birth of a baby boy, Liasun Lal Tungnung, on June 15. His parents actually fled from Manipur to Mizoram, while his mother was pregnant during this conflict to escape the violence. The mistrust that has developed between the Métis and Kukis, it was pretty difficult to heal. While the Bnei Menashe Jews wish to emigrate to Israel, the majority Christian Kukis want the separation of the hill districts from at least the southern hill district where they mainly reside, from the Manipur in 3 ways. Firstly, bringing it under the schedule of the Indian constitution, which would grant them special protection to their culture and religion. Secondly, as a union territory, which would be directly ruled by the government at New Delhi and not the local Manipur government. And third, a merger with the neighboring Mizoram, as the Mizos and Kukis are like cousins. They belong to the same tribal family, Mizos, Kukis, and Chin. W.L. Hangsting, the Bnei Menashe lawmaker, has donated about 250 acres of land at Suongpi for a kibbutz that would be occupied by the Bnei Menashe. A kibbutz is a type of a communal settlement in Israel where there is joint ownership of all property, and the profits that are derived from farming and doing other activities are equally distributed among all members. The first building has been constructed with 5 families already moving in. The settlement was renamed Maus Tisur, in Hebrew for Fortress of the Rock. Over here on the right, there is a picture of the 5 families who have moved in. And it is interesting to note that the head of the construction crew at this kibbutz, Shem Haukib, he originally hails from the Shojal village that was burned down. Sorry, my text came towards the end. Okay. To conclude, the emergence of Bnei Menashe has been viewed as a byproduct of Christian proselytization, an unintended legacy of British colonialism by scholars such as Tudor Fairfield. Unlike their cousins in Mizoram, the Bnei Menashe Jews are more prominent in the social, political, and economic spheres of Manipur, than they even have lawmakers in the in the Legislative Assembly of Manipur. The land is the main reason behind the present conflict, whereby non-tribals are trying to grab the forest lands from the backward tribals using colonial era legislations to legitimize themselves. This similar situation was observed in the colonial times across India, whereby many tribal rebellions against the British government occurred between 1850s and 1920s, starting from the Santal Rebellion in 1850s to the Rompa Rebellion in 1920s, whereby the colonial British government tried to grab the land from the tribals. This is not a case of anti-Semitism, as the Bnei Menashe Jews have not been targeted for their Jewish identity, but due to their Kuki ethnicity, like the Christian Kukis. As observed, the ethnicity dominates over all other identities over here in Manipur. There have been hardliners on both sides who are trying to project this as a Hindu versus Christian fight. It is not like that. Regarding the political parties, they have maintained their distance from the conflict as they want to preserve their vote banks. The Bharatiya Janata Party, or the BJP, which is the ruling party both at the center and the state, and it enjoys support among both Kukis and Métis, and it has just tried to remain quiet and it didn't take any side. The local Métis leaders of Manipur government in BJP, such as the Biren Singh, he actually tried to indirectly help the Métis people in this violence. And so the BJP's popularity has declined, both among the Kukis and Métis, who have been fed up with the inability of the state leadership to stop this carnage. The Mizo National Front, which was previously a revolutionary organization that took part in that organized the Mizo uprising in 1966 and is now a major political party in the state of Mizoram. It has tried to cash in on the help it extended towards the Kuki refugees who came into Mizoram by declaring in their election manifesto that they aim to unite all the Kuki, Chin, and Mizo groups located across Southeast Asia and South Asia. This conflict has done great damage to Manipur's plural cultural fabric and the Northeast India's in a larger sense. The solution, as the Christian cookies have put forward, is that the separation of hill districts from Manipur and the Bene Menashe Jews have opined the emigration of the 5,000 strong community to Israel. This would be the first time in the history of India that the Jews would leave the country due to violence in their home states. India has been one of the few countries in the world where Jews could reside peacefully since ancient times without any need for withdrawing themselves into a self-created ghetto. Now there are a few pictures of the burnt Torah scroll obtained from the Shajol village and the few Bene Menashe Jews who fled to the nearby hillock to save themselves from the violence that occurred on May 3. This is the scenes from a relief camp in Thingdol. They are all Kuki villagers, and those wearing skull caps are Jewish Bene Menashe, and the other are Christian Kukis. And here are the two joyful images. On the left, you can see the picture of the marriage of Asher Chen and Naomi Lehojem, and on the right is the newborn baby Lia Sunglal in his mother's embrace. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sayan, for your presentation. Of course, although you don't explicitly discuss like the topic of democracy or the as what has been discussed by the previous presenters, but I think the experience of the community that you discuss in your paper would give us some insight of how could we reflect about democracy in India and also compared to Indonesia and maybe other countries. Thank you so much, Sayan, for your presentation. We go now to the last presenters. We will have Rolina Anggreni Esther Kaunang and Gary Nelwan to present their paper. You also guys have 20 minutes for the presentation. You can start your presentation now.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Rolina Kaunang. I do this research with my friend Gary Nelwan. Okay, I will share my PowerPoint. Okay. Wait. Okay. Our research about the democratic system of Watu Pinabetengan and its practice for minority group in Minahasa land. An analysis from a hospitality perspective. Okay. I will share 4 points. That's background of the study, methodology, result and discussion, and conclusion. I'm sorry, I'm while breastfeeding my daughter. So thanks for your hospitality for that. And I will explain just a summary from our research. Hopefully, we get constructive input for all of you for our research. Okay, sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. As we know, democratic system reaps a lot of polemics in providing access such as the right to speak and express opinions for minority groups. This action can be seen in the strengthening of the attitude of majoritarianism so that the minority group often excludes minority groups in terms of religion, culture, and certain identities. Departing from this phenomenon, the study aimed to see how the democratic system that was built by Minahasa and Kester and its effects on Muslim immigrants in Minahasa as a minority or vulnerable group access their right openly and equally to express opinions and make decisions together.
Kak Rolina,
Yeah.
can you please share your screen? I think it is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh. Can I share in chat? Oh,
Is it open in your? Oh, okay.
yeah. And as a minority vulnerable group access their right openly and equally to express opinions and make decisions together. And with local communities to form common values in their environment. The method used is descriptive, qualitative with data obtained through scientific journals, books, writing, and relevant documents. Furthermore, the data will be analyzed using the appreciation of hospitality approach from Marine Moyard. It was found that in the tradition of the Minahasa people, the ancestor gather at Watu Pinametengan to have a dialogue in sharing their respective territories, and this was also supported by the hospitality of each party. It is these values and life practices that the Minahasa people continue to interpret and also apply to Muslim immigrant groups who were exiled to Minahasa land by the Dutch government at that time. This research shows the importance of rediscovering local values in building a democratic system that is inclusive, equal, and open to every individual or group as a lesson or capital for the younger generation about democratic practices and values that have been passed down by Minahasa and Kester. Okay, that's our research. Thanks for this time, and back to moderator.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kak Rolina, for the presentations. Yes, we can go now to the discussion session. there have been 4 papers being presented. I think we can have like maybe 30 minutes, 13 minutes, I mean, for the discussion. We can finish, so we can finish at 10. Yeah, so please feel free to raise your question either by typing it on the chat box, or you can raise your hand, or just unmute your microphone so you can talk directly. You can say what is your question, or maybe not necessarily question, but you can also raise your opinion, your perspective, your response to the papers being presented. And then the presenters also can raise question for the to the another presenters. Is there any question, please? And we can open the camera, I think, so we can be more engaging with one another. If there is no any,
I actually had a small question kind of from for Hannah. Small question.
please.
You mentioned about Israeli flags being raised in West Papua, and I know about a group in Papua New Guinea about a Judaism movement of Gogodala. I read an article about them by Tudor Perfect, and they even claim that their language is the Hebrew, original Hebrew in its most fluent form. Are they related to that group in any way, the people of West Papua who raised Israeli flags?
All right, man. Moderator, should I
Please.
directly answer or yeah? Okay, thank you. The question, yes, from the tribe Kokoda, it's one of the still a bit what to say extreme, although it's the minority tribes from the majority tribes in West Papua, but the actually I never heard before that the tribes is using the originally Hebrew language. I never found that before, but it's a very enriching my research for further. I hope I could looking forward about the article, the research of the
okay, I'll share it with you.
Identification of one tribes, Kokoda tribes that assign their language is original Hebrew. Although, so to say, it's good to relate, but to explain that some of the ISKIM, International Ocean Kids Adherence, highly indicate is in my research, it's mostly that they are engaged, their spiritual and mental historical griefness because they are feel in the same simply to say in the same struggle, in the same history of political pressure and discrimination from the central government. So they can relate it to the tradition of the Hebrew story Bible, that the pressure from the majority and that became the hard to express themselves. Yes. Moderator?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have any further questions or response? Sain, is that enough?
Yes, that's enough. That's enough.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sorry because I forgot to present my PPT. I'm extremely sorry for that, I think.
Yeah. But I think we can mostly grasp the points that you have highlighted for us. Is there any other questions? If not, then I will ask. So I have some questions for the presentation because all the presentation are actually very interesting to be discussed, especially again in reflecting the idea and the situation of democracy either in Indonesia or globally speaking. Like from the first presenter, Max, you discuss about the so-called non-indigenous Indonesia, that being excluded because of their identity is being assumed as not Indonesian. So it's kind of limiting was limiting their freedom at the time to engage in the politics. And it is very interesting actually, because if we see the current situation now, that it is also the problem of the indigenous peoples themselves being excluded because of their identity. So this is a kind of the irony that we see in Indonesia, that in your presentation you show us how those people, the so-called non-indigenous, being excluded because they are considered as not Indonesian, totally Indonesian, like, or pure Indonesian. But those who are pure Indonesian, the indigenous people of Indonesian, are also being excluded. So, what could you say about this? Do you see, like, is there any underlying problems behind this? Maybe if I could say the politics of identity, or if the dynamics at the time that you discussed previously, do you think is there any further implication that still exists up to the current situation of the politics of identity in Indonesia? Would you respond to this, Max?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. A very interesting question indeed. Also, a tough one to answer, I think. But yeah, I think you could see some similarities between the two cases, of course, because they are both yeah, they are sort of being taken away their voices, of course, the one for some for being not indigenous Indonesians and others for being, yeah, maybe too indigenous Indonesians. So they, uh, yeah, their voices are largely being ignored by the main political parties, of course, because yeah, their focus is on their own political gains, mostly, of course, and uh, because those other minority voices, either be those of the so-called non-indigenous or the indigenous Indonesians, they do not really fit into that narrative. They are, of course, yeah, somewhat placed along the sidelines. So I think you could see some consistencies, unfortunately, in those cases until now. I think, yeah, this is still happening in a different context, but largely, I think the same sort of process. Yes. I'm sorry, you're still muted.
Okay, thank you so much, Max, for your response. If anyone want to get involved in the conversation, please feel free to just open your microphone and just talk. We can just discuss this in that way. Yeah, for me, thank you, Max, for your response. As you said, that it is very interesting actually to see that different cases, meaning that maybe it is not necessarily the matter of the originality of being Indonesian, but there is a kind of politics behind that use the narratives of identity to, like, to for certain interests, be it political interest or other interest. I have also some questions for the other presenters. Maybe I can just say it all to the presenters, and then all presenters could start to answer. The next question is for Hannah, discussing about the movement in Papua. It is also very interesting, as I said before, because it involves the dynamics of the state. We know it is very complicated between the state and the society. Then there in Papua, but also it involves the roles of church there. And this is kind of interesting, as you raise the point about the paradox of the church, that on one hand that they can be the instrument of peace and justice, but on the other hand there is also a kind of religious exclusivism that make the church sometimes discriminate the minority. So from that paradox, what insight could we get from that point? Like, does it mean that we need a more comprehensive way in perceiving the problem in Papua, for example, that religious dimension, you raise the dimension of religion, which is, I think, quite rarely discussed when people talk about Papua. They don't really engage the topic of religion. They focus more on the politics, the economy, and so on. So what could you say about this? Does it mean that one problem, one issue, religion, politics, and etc. cannot be separated from one another. And then for Sayan, I'm wondering, I'm curious about like what kind of narratives have been developing around the issue, like what narrative have been raised by the community themselves or those who work for the community. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned some institution or maybe non-governmental organization working for those communities, and in what narratives they frame their works. Like, is it in the name of human rights or religious freedom, or in the Indian constitution itself, and how using that narratives have been effective, to what extent is it's been effective for the struggles of the community. And then the last one for Carolina and Gary, it is very interesting topics about the democracy. It's kind of tradition-based democracy, that from the traditional practices of Watu Pinaweteng, and then we try to reflect the idea, the principle of democracy from that practices. So my question is, what values could this tradition-based democracy could add to our dynamics of democracy nowadays? We know that there are many worrying the situation of democracy, that it's been worsening by some dynamics, some problems, some issue, especially before the prior to the election momentum. So if we learn from what to Pinaweteng and practices, what values can we get from there? What kind of insights? It's kind of, we want to learn from the local practices, right, for the national construction of democracy, or even global narratives of democracy itself. Yeah, so those are the questions that come to my mind when I listen to those interesting presentations previously. So yeah, please feel free who want to start to answer the question first. Sayan, do you want to start?
Okay, I can start. Regarding narrative, all we will have to look actually at the colonial era. The state of Manipur that is present, it only in the princely state of Manipur only included the centrally located Imphal Valley. Let me just share my screen now, because I couldn't share it that time. I'm extremely sorry for that. Okay, over here you can see these northeastern regions. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Is it visible, my screen?
Yes, you can see
Okay,
it.
these northeastern states, neither of them, except a few parts of Assam, have ever been incorporated by any empire in Indian mainland. All these were brought by the British. And regarding the Manipur, over here you can see the Manipur state centered only the centrally located Imphal Valley. The Meiteis only ruled that part for the history, and the remaining portions were added by the British for the convenience, as they did everywhere, drawing borders and all those for their administrative convenience. Since it was kind of a forceful wedding between the tribals and non-tribals at that time. And after the British went there, the tribal conflicts has happened, they continued. And they have been continued throughout in post-colonial times. And the recent one that occurred, that as the non-tribals, they cannot buy lands in tribal lands, but the tribals can buy non-tribal lands. And there, in the Indian constitution, there are pretty much strong provisions for the protection of tribals. They get preferential treatments in jobs, education schemes, and there are special schemes for their health. The non-tribals don't get any of this, and there are reservations for them. And for that, mainly they are a bit angry, and they even demanded the tribal status. At that time, when initially it was granted to them after Indian independence, they denied it. At that time, taking that would be kind of demeaning for them. They don't look, we are tribals, they don't want that. But now they're demanding that as they would get the benefit. And finally the court granted them that benefit, and the tribals grew angry as they were comparatively backward than the non-tribal Métis, who occupy about more than 60% of the jobs and everything that are in Manipur. And regarding that, the tribe, the non-tribe, there is another narrative that has been propagated by the Métis, that the Cookies, who are the tribals, they mainly engage in farming of drugs and other things, which is kind of true. But only the farmers are the drug who cultivate the drug at Cookies, and its peddlers and all the traders, they belong to the majority non-tribal Métis community. Actually, there is a cartel of drug in the district, in the states of Manipur. Even the chief minister of the state is involved in that. He personally intervened in 2020 to get a smuggler released from the police station. At that time, this drug menace is a major problem in the state. And the main religious freedom is not that much of a problem over in India. Here, even the Jews who are not recognized as a minority by the central government, they have their freedom of worship. They can do everything that they want. And the main problem is the human right problem over here. As the Meitei majority, they are trying to they delegitimize the citizenship of the Kukis by referring to them as outsiders. They have come from Burma and Bangladesh. They are not indigenous, something like that. As I mentioned, sent by the Pramod Singh, who is the leader of one of the militant organizations in Manipur. And all these struggles, that most of the problems that are witnessed in India at present, they have their origin in the British times. Most of the problems like those, this is also somewhat like that. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much, Sayan, for your response. Yeah, we can continue to the other presenter. Hannah, you want to continue?
Yes, all right. Yes, thank you, moderator, for the feedback. And for me, of course, I certainly agree that the problem in Papua needs a new comprehensive. The more the best. So it could, in many ways, could be alternative way to solve the problem, that very complex problem in Papua. But for me, the simple way through is how to get the democracy, more democracy could emerge in the society, that the government is could more encourage less position to take in one side, because in my case, as also in finding that the Christianity of a religion is the as an instrument that have a power to, because in my findings that it's already became of internalized their part of their identity many years, that it could become a resistance for a political problem, that or educational problem, that it could become I call it a backward understanding. And the paradox of the power of the church in here, and the solution is from the government, because the government who facilitate the society to express themselves, to be the neutral part, to be the state, the representation for every diversity. I mean, it's not just simply for the minority or majority, but they have to become neutral in there. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Hannah. The last one, Rolina or Gary, you want to say something?
All right. Thank you for opportunity, moderator. I think in the first point, uh, I'm so sorry. I will share in bahasa. Poin yang penting dalam penelitian kami itu melihat bagaimana Watu Pinawetengan ini sebagai ruang, sebagai tempat yang menjadi simbol terjadinya demokrasi yang terbuka dan setara, belajar dari para pemimpin di konteks Minasa ini hadir, berbicara, bermusyawarah tanpa melihat latar belakang kesukuan atau dominasi wilayah. Nah, itu terjadi sehingga banyak keputusan-keputusan kultural itu terjadi melalui tempat Watu Pinawetengan yang kemudian menjadi warisan atau mengaktifasi kembali nilai-nilai demokrasi itu tanpa melihat atau menjadi counter narasi terhadap demokrasi yang merujuk kepada majoritarianisme atau demokrasi yang lebih bersifat minoritas dan mayoritas, khususnya demokrasi dalam hal berpendapat di ruang publik berbasis identitas keagamaan. Itu mungkin poin yang bisa kami bagikan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. For Max and Sayan, maybe I cannot translate like the whole point, but among like the main point that Gary want to say is about the importance, as I said before, like to learn from the local democracy, quote unquote, because we know that the current construction of democracy has been quite problematic. There has been many problems there, and if you want to make like democracy meaningful for all the peoples, for example, of Indonesia, which are very diverse, meaning that we have to like to have the roots of democracy themselves from the locality that we have all around Indonesia, so that meaning that the participation in democracy is become more meaningful because all citizens like kind of contribute their local perspective to this democracy, the construction of democracy or principle as our shared values in our citizenship life. Thank you so much, Gary, and yeah, thank you so much for all. And sorry for the delay of the time. It's been 10:08 now, but thank you so much for the discussion. It's been a kind of eye-opening discussion for all of us. I think we could exchange some perspectives based on the experience of different communities, and what we can see is that the problem of democracy that we have now involves like many other dimensions. It is quite complicated, meaning also the way we respond it need like a more collaborative or kind of comprehensive analysis to understand the problem, understanding that one problem cannot be separated from another problem, as well as the dimensions of the perspective that we use, like the political, social, the legal narratives like human rights, religious freedom, etc., the citizenship rights. It cannot be separated from one another. That it is very complicated, but as we can see in our panel, that all of you have tried to like to touch certain parts of that complicated problem, then we can like contribute to the rich discussion, I think, for all of us. Yeah, I think that's all for our panel today. Thank you so much again for all of your participations in our conference. Hopefully the feedback that you get, your experience of joining the conference and this session be helpful for the development of your research in the future. Thank you so much for all.
Thank you.
Thank you
Terima
for
kasih
the-
banyak.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Bye.